All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking the incredibly detailed and frankly fascinating universe of Dreamweaver. If you've been following the lore with us, you already know this isn't just your standard fantasy world of simple spells and endless sword fights. Oh no, it's a deeply complex system where the hard rules of physics, socioeconomics, and psychology literally intertwine with magic. Today, we're going on a serious journey. We're moving from visceral, physical survival in a toxic wasteland all the way to the profound, intricate mastery of the mind itself. As you'll see, we're going to examine exactly how the characters leverage not just raw, overwhelming power, but supreme intellect and deeply structured systems to conquer their environment. It's a wild ride, so let's get to it.
We've actually got a lot of ground to cover today, so here is the game plan. First, the Basilisk boss battle. Second, the mechanics of Phoenix Tears. Third, engineering the water network. Fourth, we'll look at the philosophy of piracy. And finally, number 5, the chemistry of the mind. Let's start with number 1.
Section 1. The Basilisk Boss Battle. Surviving the Toxic Nightmare.
Okay, so we start right in the thick of things. A high-stakes, absolute nightmare of a battle against a venomous basilisk. This fight pushed our characters to the absolute brink, leaving Kieran completely exhausted and traumatized. But here's the thing about Dreamweaver. Just buffing your stats isn't going to save you here. The basilisk actually held the advantage, right up until the players realized their inherent affinities were superior. So how do you survive this? Well, Kieran had to rely on Hosek Phoenix's legendary Zone of Absolute Defense. But he didn't just use it as a shield. He repurposed it as a highly sensitive detection field to track the beast's blindingly fast movements. He combined his fire affinity with a much more intense spectrum of light, essentially shifting into this hyper-aware cat and spider mode just to outmaneuver the creature. It was so intense that he literally had to leave Concordia out of the fight entirely, simply because the basilisk's toxic nature would have been completely debilitating to her specific affinities. And this brilliantly illustrates something I love about this lore: the two distinct, highly strategic ways to actually defeat a boss like this, as broken down by Kieran's father. On one hand, you've got the brute force, physical approach used by San and Mitsuki. Mitsuki leveraged her affiliation to the House of the Hound, tapping into the moon's torrential gravitational pull to literally shatter the monster's fangs and impale it. Just incredible raw power. But then, on the other hand, you have Ariel. Ariel bypassed direct, destructive combat altogether. Instead of physical impalement, she used a purifying blaze technique. Now, she wasn't just fighting fire with fire. This was essentially a full-on exorcism. Her blaze invoked a severing effect that completely disconnected the basilisk's venom from its victim. It nullified the curse entirely without risking any further contamination. Two completely different methods, both incredibly effective. Section 2. Mechanics of Phoenix Tears. Infinite treasures in finite vessels.
Moving on from the battlefield to the actual spoils of war, let's talk about the ultimate reward they earned: Vials of Phoenix Tears. When Concordia scanned these with the Libra system, she made a brilliant, game-changing realization about how this item actually works. Think about it. Normally, if you drop a soluble into a vast solvent, like a drop of dye in a swimming pool, the effect diminishes proportionally to the amount of liquid, right? But Concordia deduced that because a single drop of Phoenix Tears can cure any ailment, regardless of how vast the solvent appears to be, the item itself must be completely immune to dilution. Instead of watering down, a single drop forcefully transforms the entire volume of the solvent into more Phoenix Tears at the exact same concentration as the original drop. It is, quite literally, an infinite treasure held in a finite vessel. It's a well that never ever runs dry.
But you can't just spam this item. Using it requires real strategy. As Kieran's father points out, these tears act as the ultimate immunization. They give anyone who drinks them the permanent power to resurrect from 0 HP, allowing them to jump right back into the fight from the exact moment they were downed. That is huge. However, there's a massive catch. Before using it, they had to destroy what he calls the venomous supply chain. If they had just grabbed the loot, run home, and tried to cure their patient without first defeating or exorcising that basilisk, they would have poisoned their entire party. The logic is clear. You can't just treat the symptom. You absolutely must sever the source of the curse before drinking from the source of wholesome goods. It's a brilliant mechanic that forces players to actually finish the job.
Section 3. Engineering the water network, Aquarius, and hybridized purification.
Now, let's look at how all of this builds into actual, real-world civil engineering with the Aquarius skill. Armed with the knowledge that Phoenix Tears can infinitely replicate, Cyto and Ariel don't just wave a magic wand. Instead, they use actual physics to build a hybridized purification network. They string together this rigorous multi-step system. Step 1, filtration.
They use increasingly constricted mesh fabrics inside the pipes to physically catch solid waste. Step 2 is sedimentation, where they allow fine dust particles to settle at the bottom of parallel tanks over time. Step 3 is distillation. They use siphoning pumps, created via Dreamweaving, to boil the water and condense the vapor, effectively removing all fluid waste. Only after applying all of these strict physical laws do they introduce Step 4, adding that precious single drop of phoenix tears into the final batch for ultimate magical purification. It's a perfect blend of science and magic.
This engineering marvel is absolutely crucial because it creates a completely independent water supply network, safely separated from the venomous supply chain, ensuring they can sustain food production and life. They even dump a single drop of phoenix tears directly into the sea. The hope there is to purify the entire ocean and, by extension, perfectly sustain their irrigation channels and food production globally. It brilliantly highlights that in the Dreamweaver universe, true power isn't just about blowing things up or winning a boss fight. It's about building sustainable systems. It's about regulating rainfall through maintaining forests and ensuring the environment itself acts as a shield against those debilitating stats. It's macro-level survival.
Section 4. The Philosophy of Piracy. The Roots of the Ultimate Piracy Formation. All right, so now we are going to zoom way out to the macro level of socioeconomics. While inspecting their newly built water system, the characters start drawing parallels to the flow of goods and data. This brings us to a wildly fascinating ethical framework that completely redefines piracy, starting with one incredibly bold claim: no true pirate is a thief. I know, it sounds crazy, but the logic here is incredibly tight. The explainer argues that a true pirate never actually breaks a just law. Why? Because a true pirate must legally purchase the initial products at its explicitly stated price. By doing that, they legally claim ownership of every single integrated functionality within that purchased unit. Because they bought it as is, this framework deems it illegal for the original creator to suddenly place arbitrary restrictions on what the purchaser can do with their legally acquired functionalities. Let's break down the difference between simple theft and what they call true piracy. Theft is simply claiming property without consent or purchase, which, in this universe, rightfully brings down divine punishment. But true piracy, that requires that initial consent through a legal purchase. Once it's bought, the pirate uses the mass shadow clone jutsu to reverse engineer and duplicate the product. If they clone it exactly, it retains the original producer's name. If they alter it in any way, they change the name to respect the original creator's work. The pirate then distributes it freely to drive competition. Think about it. The original creator maintains their high production standards to justify that initial price tag, while the pirate absorbs all the distribution and advertising costs.
And that brings us to the Yggdrasil Formation Level I. This is the ultimate piracy formation, an economic framework where piracy is actually the essential oil keeping the entire industry running. It creates a completely perfect symbiotic relationship. No one spends an extra penny unnecessarily, the producer's costs are strictly limited to their own production and maintenance, and they run a profit precisely because the pirates are out there providing massive free advertising. Meanwhile, the pirates only pay for that initial purchase and their own hack development. Because of this unique competitive dynamic, both sides are essentially forced to keep the production standards incredibly high, which ends up benefiting the entire consumer base. In this model, everyone wins and literally no one loses. It is a fascinating concept.
Section 5. Chemistry of the Mind. The Focus of Ideas.
Finally, we are zooming all the way inward from macroeconomics to the micro-level mechanics of the human mind itself. Concordia delivers this profound lecture to the archers, blending the physical science of the Aquarius skill we just talked about with metaphysical psychology. And she asks a really fascinating question. How does the chemistry of solutions relate to the focus of ideas? She transitions the entire lesson from talking about literal solutions, a mixture of a soluble and a solvent, into a deep discussion about how our thoughts dissolve and integrate into the very base of our consciousness.
Concordia explains that just as a physical solvent needs dissolution compatibility to break down a soluble, the mind itself requires compatible thoughts to properly form ideas. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. In physics, forces like heat or the kinetic forces that combine centripetal and centripetal motion from stirring a pot, they all affect the rate of dissolution. But crucially, the forces acting on the soluble absolutely cannot conflict with the forces acting on the solvent. They have to align for integration. In the exact same way, the ideas and experiences you introduce into your own mind must align with your foundational purpose. If they don't, they simply won't integrate. They just become noise. This brilliantly illustrates the core philosophy of what it takes to be a dream knight. The mind is literally described as a brewing pot, and your ideas are the ingredients. Ideas aren't just formed in a vacuum, they are a complex brew of multiple experiences put together for a highly specific purpose. If you carefully organize relevant thoughts, you brew what Concordia calls fine wine. But if you allow irrelevance, circumstantiality, and empty banter to just dump into the pot, you brew bad wine. And this matters deeply in this universe because only sharply focused ideas strengthen a Dream Knight's unique sigil, their personalized sealed weapon. A diffused, unfocused mind literally diffuses their presence and directly weakens their combative arts.
So as we wrap up this incredibly layered explainer of the Dreamweaver universe, taking us all the way from the toxic fangs of the Basilisk boss battle to the endless purity of Phoenix tears, through the symbiotic economics of the Yggdrasil formation, and finally into the delicate chemistry of our own thoughts, I really want you to reflect on Concordia's lesson. Look at your own life. Will you carefully organize the ingredients in the brewing pot of your own mind, or will you let your greatest ideas diffuse into irrelevance? How are you focusing the chemistry of your mind today? Are you filtering out the noise to strengthen your own unique potential, or are you letting your presence diffuse into empty banter? Think about it, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.